Call the meeting to order. Meeting of the Town of Holden Beach Audit Committee meeting. We have 4 members in attendance. The one member, Mark Fleschauer, is not in attendance, could not attend. So we have a quorum. There's approval. I need a motion to approve the minutes, or you have any comments for changes?
I do have one change, and I got one question.
Which set?
Well, November 8th,
Okay.
Tony and I were not at that meeting, so I don't know if it's appropriate for us to vote
Sure did.
on the minutes.
Oh, sure it is, sure.
How? I can't say they're right.
Okay, I get you.
Yeah.
Well, there's only 2 of us otherwise.
I mean, I don't know if I just need to vote present or...
If you
but
don't vote, it's considered a positive.
Okay. Because, I mean, I can't say that any
Yeah.
of this is
I'm in
correct.
the same boat,
You
yeah,
agree?
Okay.
yeah, because I wasn't at that meeting. I can attest to these. But
On the the March 8th minutes,
Right.
in the first paragraph, is it appropriate to mention that Pat and Mike were at the meeting since they were there as public?
No, we don't list the public attendees.
That's what I'm saying, so we need to take
So we have to take them
I
off
was
both
told by the
minutes.
clerk to list.
Oh, if commissioners?
If commissioners came, I was told by the clerk to list if they were there
Okay, that's
in
fine.
attendance.
I just,
Well, it's in both of them, yeah.
Could be, but for your info for this kind of a meeting, when multiple commissioners come, they don't participate at all
Yeah.
because we haven't announced the meeting and we have a quorum of
Yes.
commissioners in the room. So they have to
I understand.
bite their lips.
I just, it was, like I said, it was back to it, but they were the public. They really weren't there in an official function as a commissioner. On the last paragraph on the March 8th minutes, the new business, if you look at that last sentence, it says, Chair Fletcher said the committee was not to discuss the RSM report because the final draft had not been reviewed by the BOC, and he wasn't, just like the word sure is missing.
Yeah,
But
sure. You're right. Should say sure. Wasn't
But did
sure.
you really mean he wasn't sure if they wanted the committee to get
Right.
involved?
Right.
Why would we not want
Well,
to get involved?
that was David's observation.
Oh.
They do. They have since. We're talking about that later.
Okay, all right. So that's one word missing there.
So,
I'll just put sure in.
David,
Okay.
do you have the rules on something like this? We don't have enough people who were here at that meeting.
Well, I
that
can
vote
see
on this.
that.
Should we wait for that one to vote at the next meeting? And just approve the one that we can approve? In terms of the minutes?
I'm gonna make a judgment call and see that if, I mean, you could have the case where all the committee gets reappointed at the beginning of the year and the minutes from the previous year would never get approved because those minutes, those people that are on the board were never there. So, you know, I think that that in this case that, you know, unless you have knowledge that they're not accurate representations, you can either not vote to affirm wherein it becomes an affirmation.
Right.
But I think you have to vote.
So, can I get a motion to approve both of them?
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So they're both approved. As changed, yes. Number 3 on the agenda is review the quarterly financials. You've all received them. David, do you want to make any overall observations about the status of the affairs at the end of the third quarter?
Generally speaking, I'll comment generally just as a recap. Your report is organized, the revenues are up front and the expenses are the second piece of it. And I know, John, we've dialogued on, and the way we've actually structured our budget presentations this time is that we organize it by fund and it's revenue expense, whereas this just is revenues by
All the
fund and
revenues.
expenses by fund, and that's just a consequence of the way that we run, the way that we do this run. So
We can take these sheets apart. and
yeah, I
just
mean,
put it behind each fund.
if that's the way you want to do it, that's
impossible.
fine. If you go through, and this is a really 60,000 foot level comment, if you go through and look at actual expenses to actual revenues, you'll see in the major funds, and water's a good example, that you see you'll see we're out probably $1.5 million on revenues less than expenses, keeping in mind that we haven't done a fund balance appropriation. So if you're just looking at the run, you're going to show that your expenses are significantly more than the actuals you've brought in. But you have to consider that the fund balance appropriation is a budgetary entry that's made the very last part of the year to true up. So if you look at it in that perspective, if you're doing a gross level run, you go, oh my God, we're $1 million off, but you have to consider that the fund balance appropriation.
I've got questions about that. I don't know if those are, what is that? That's transferring from one fund to another?
No, the fund balance appropriation is basically you're using money from your savings account. Your
Okay,
stock
that's
book.
right.
That's
Yep.
what
What you're going to take
in
the
that
balance
fund.
sheet
Got
and
it.
put it on the income statement, so have the expenses covered.
Well, yeah. You're
You're
either going to savings or from
Yeah.
savings.
Exactly.
And so
What's in there is saved right now, it's in the bank,
and
by fund.
And the specific example of that in the water fund is the upgrade retrofit of the sewer lift station. So all of those, that's like $1.5 million. So all of those expenses come out, up front.
And the board has already approved appropriating the money from the fund.
It's in the budget, yes.
So the result of that is that these interim reports look weird. They look like we're going to come in significantly under budget in a lot of cases, or either the revenues are low or the expenses are,
Or the appropriations.
well,
It could have been that every fund, the board said, in order to meet this budget that we're proposing,
this
at the end of the year, we're going to take out what we need out of the savings account for each fund
But-
and put it into revenue.
wouldn't that be in the budget then?
It was in the budget.
It has just have been appropriated.
No,
It's in the
excuse me.
budget.
That's a matter of semantics. The
Okay.
put in the budget is an appropriation.
Oh, excuse me.
It's just that the actual physical act of making that
Making the
appropriation it's a year-end action
Yeah.
to put that money into play.
It's
is
almost
what it
like
amounts
the
to.
revenue for ad valorem taxes is in the budget, the full amount we're proposing, so that's expected. But it's not actually there yet if you go through this month until we send the bill and we get the money.
Right.
And the same thing with the appropriation, it's in there, but we haven't actually taken it out yet, so it won't be actually collected yet.
And the beauty of that particular, or I call it a beauty, is that let's say in the water fund, if your expenses on that project aren't, say well, everything else being equal, it means you don't have to spend that $100,000 in
Don't have to
at
draw
the end
down
of
the
the year.
fund.
You don't have to draw down that savings. So in essence, fund balance appropriations are strictly budgetary type entries at the end of the year in order to balance the books.
Is that the same thing with Fund 50? Is that why there's such a big discrepancy there?
Yeah, and speaking of Fund 50, let me just flip this. Primarily that Fund 50 is the contribution to the capital reserve fund, $3.3 million. And so there had to be a fund balance appropriation made of that in order to affect that action. That's an example of where the fund balance appropriation is made mid-year when we actually do it, because it's a three-part transfer. Whereas the other one is an end-of-year fund balance and true up.
So let me ask you a question in the scheme of us still understanding these numbers. If you look at your expenditures, encumbrances, and appropriations, go to the very last page,
Which fund?
the bottom total.
On expenses?
Yes. Are you there?
Page 14?
Well, I used the spread. I got the spreadsheet instead of
Okay.
the printed, but it's the same.
And so what are we talking about, fund are we talking about?
It's the total of all of them. It's the very bottom line.
Okay.
All right. So year to date, which is the third column in the center there, it's 12.2 without my glasses, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, and then you got outstanding encumbrances of 1.1.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that adds up. Let's call that
13.3.
14 million. Is that close enough?
Well, 12 and 1
Oh, I'm sorry.
13 is 12.3.
No, I'm sorry. You're right. 12.3. All right. So if you go look at revenues, year to date is 14.8.
Okay.
So
But you got to realize that in some regards you're double counting those capital reserve fund transfers, so it does skew that total.
okay, thank you. That's what I was trying to figure out the difference.
And I always like to at least acknowledge the ad valorem tax collection bogey kind of thing that is actually on page 1 of the revenue sheet. We're at almost 98% of the budgeted line there, and what the phenomenon we see here at Holden Beach is because the real estate market is so active. When I say and so active is a relative term, that we really don't have to worry about accounts defaulting per se or losing value because taxes aren't paid, because the real estate turns over on a frequent enough basis that the tax lady always gets her cut.
If they sell the house or the
Yeah,
property,
yeah.
we get the tax out of
It
it.
collects from,
That's part of the deal.
and I know that I've probably said this a number of times, because of the penalties and interest, afforded through the Machinery Act, that here until lately, that it unpaid taxes was a better source of investment than what we were getting at the bank.
And collect it and put it in the bank.
Assuming you eventually get it.
Because the interest rates have been abysmal, but that has changed rather drastically here in the last couple of months, and Woody's helped us a bunch on figuring out what our sweet spot is in our in our cash flow, and what is safe to keep a more appropriate balance to invest, so that we don't have too much in the checking account, and we've got an adequate carrying amount so that we can make our debt service payments and our normal monthly operational costs, plus helping with some additional interest-bearing capabilities. So those interest accounts have seen some movement in them also. But to the
For Tony and Tom, you may not know that Woody helped the town by reviewing the overall process. And if you look at our budget for the year to the actual interest income, it's significantly higher than we were planning to get. And the work between David and Woody put together a much more effective scheme to generate interest for us.
to the to the point about the tax lady always gets her cut, if you look at, the third line down, ad valorem taxes prior, and some of the market things we're seeing, those, we're actually $7,200 above what we had budgeted, and normally that's predicated, on a past trend
Is that
history.
because of selling a property, not for people just paying up the bill?
What we are seeing is that it's collections based on people selling property. Yeah, because a lot of time, that's a strategy that buyers and sellers will, well, I'll just let it ride, and then, we'll take it
Take
off
care
the
of it
backside,
anyway.
take it out, take it. So that's what we think that the lion's share of that is. We'll take it.
So do we know about how much is still outstanding of old ad valorem taxes?
Not
Any
in
feel?
total.
10,000, 100,000?
But
No.
she's getting ready to publish the
list.
the list.
Call
It's
me
getting
before
ready
you
to
publish
go.
it.
Yeah.
The list is getting ready
list
to
of
go.
shame,
the,
right?
the list of shame's getting ready to
Is
go
that
down
not, is that not
front.
booked on the balance sheet as some kind of receivable or previous year tax liability?
At the end of the year, right? We're on the accrual basis, but we're on a cash basis here.
Well, that would be on the
But-
cash
Yeah,
basis.
this is, yeah.
But yeah,
So this interest is kind of spread among the different accounts, because I come to like
Yeah.
70 with 6 cents, and it's like, why do we even have that fund? I don't quite understand.
yeah, that's a cleanup action that needs to take place.
But each
We just
fund
haven't
will
done
earn its
that.
own interest.
Well, I look
Yeah.
at Fund
That's,
70, and it's,
that's a cleanup that hadn't happened yet. That's administrative
okay.
thought there.
It's around in there.
But,
And I think the pre-answer your question is that the interest is apportioned to the different funds based on what
The balances?
the balances
Okay.
at that point in time are. There's on the expense side, and this is just exemplimatic, and I'm not trying to jump
Well,
around,
you-
but we always want to make sure that we keep our debt services paid. For example, if you look at Fund 50, it's page 9 on the expense sheet. Debt service center reach, it's like the 1, 2, 3rd line down.
You said page 9?
On
50?
oh, here it is. In fact, no,
I've got page 1 starts
Okay.
50.
50 is not one.
I'm on
A
the
different
paper.
printout.
We can find it.
Okay.
We'll show you. Yeah.
Is there flexibility on how these statements can be produced?
Not
Or is it
much.
purely just this is
Not
the way
much.
it is?
It's a canned
Canned.
function. I mean, there is, if there's a desire to look at it differently, we'd have to go in and play with it. But this is pretty much, what we've got ingrained in us
That's the
on how we,
microfund software, right?
yeah, as how we do it
And
now.
you said these, you just dumped into Excel and sent them to us.
That's right.
Well, the ones that break on funds certainly are cleaner than,
Yes.
I've gotten a couple that just were a big run.
Yeah, and we,
Yeah, I
and we
track
can
right
do that.
there.
There's a way to
Yeah.
fracture that
Back to
out,
funds.
and
Revenue
just-
and expense and fund.
yeah.
Right fund.
What we find is that on the revenue side,
Uh-huh.
every revenue line, like say Fund 10, is a separate department. So it doesn't, and there is no correlation between a revenue department, because the natural inclination is that a department goes over to a certain expense line. That really only holds true with the recent law passed with building inspections, that you can't charge any more for inspections fees than the building inspections, which is, oh, by the way, it's reportable now to the LGC on that specifically. But I'm sorry, for example, on page 1, John,
Yeah.
in Fund 50, the debt service on the Central Reach, the budget there is 1.422. You'll notice that the year-to-date expenditures is only 1.3 to date. That's because the principal and interest due dates are separate. So we pay principal in the fall, and you got an interest payment.
Is it an annual payment of interest, or?
Yeah, and it's scheduled. So we pay principal just the way that it was scheduled. The deal was, don't make one
You
payment.
pay it off earlier than you pay the expenses for the year?
And there's a special obligation bond, and there's arbitrage on the back side of it. So they really want it. They don't want it early, and they don't want it late.
So this 1317 doesn't include the interest?
Right, the interest payment remaining is the unencumbered balance of 104 out to the right.
Right.
That'll be made this month, I believe.
So they're not made at the same time?
Mm-mm. You make,
That's
you
what I
make the
said.
principal in the fall and the interest in the spring.
You benefit from an interest charge because of that, or not? You know?
Just the way, that's kind of the terms that we got from the bank on getting the money.
These
If
bankers-
there's a benefit to the town or the other side, I'm not aware of how that.
The bankers tend to go the other way.
Well, yeah, I know,
No.
you said arbitrage, I was wondering, were we
But they're
making
using
more
our money.
than they're
They're
charging
using
us?
our money.
No,
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
but that would have been
Yeah.
that would have been
in
when
the
we
past,
when
we made
had
nothing,
it.
right?
Well, I mean, we don't have any money in the bank, based on this. This is all debt service going
Right,
out
you're
now.
paying, okay.
Yeah, anyway. Was there another copy of that, Woody? Did you have another copy of it?
There's one right here.
Yeah, I just
Do you
want,
not need
because my copy's the bad
Is
copy.
that the, yeah. I think I have that.
What's wrong with your copy?
Because that's that 329.
Which, remind me, which payment is this, the second or the third for Central Reach? We had a 10-year payout time for 12 million plus interest.
I think the answer's 2.5 because that interest. Remember,
Well,
we paid the
excluding
interest
the
first,
principal.
and
This
then
is the third principal payment, and when we make the interest, then there'll be 3 out
the.
of 10, so we have 7 years left. Anything else we ought to look at, David?
We're wrapping up.
Major issues, or
We're wrapping up the canal dredging project. Dredging operations finished. So I think that Margaret's got there's $100,000 bill, to pay, and then there'll be a demobilization draw on the back side of that. So, but collectively, where those guys are going to end up is we'll probably end up rolling about $1.5 million forward in their capital dredging accounts, if you will, collectively.
is that the
So-
million that we got as a payment? for the-
Well, that's a net number.
Funding.
That's a net number on the canal dredging. That's the Harbor Acres, Holden Beach Harbor.
Right.
So we started the year like 1.9 or something, or we're gonna roll 1.5?
Yeah, because remember we got a state grant.
No, I know, I just,
Yeah.
it seems like, I don't know what you canal owners think, but it's a lot of money that's sitting there, because they just got dredged, right? So they won't need to be dredged for,
Well, I know I'm on the board for our set of canals,
yeah.
and we always want to make sure we got enough money, quote unquote, in the bank, so that if something happened tomorrow,
I
we could start the next
I-
day. We don't want to wait to collect, then
I
start.
understand.
And that's
But you're
the
sitting
way-
on 1.5 and you just got dredged.
Yeah.
So
Well,
you
that's
should
not
be
just,
sitting
but
really
that's
pretty.
not just us.
No,
there's three
but
sets of
everybody,
them.
I just, it struck me that
Well, we weren't expecting to.
are you gonna keep collecting from you guys?
Oh, yeah. We're going to reduce the amount.
Okay.
But that's really a function of recommendation that comes out of the canal working group that's comprised of representatives from all of those. So I don't recommend anything that group's not fine with. And the odd thing, not odd, but the idiosyncratic aspect of that is one group wants to keep a lot of money in there, one group wants to keep bare bones, and the other one's kind of the Goldilocks.
So we
Halfway there. So. Between the three of them, that
Do
could
they have
help.
to come to a consensus?
Well, what they do is those assessments that are levied along with the tax bill every year are made on a a district basis, and each one of those canal subdivisions is a district in and of itself. So
And each one has its
Woody's,
own board.
Woody's
Yeah,
can
they're
have a
decisions.
different, Holden Beach, and they all three are different. Holden Beach Harbor Heritage, Harbor, and Harbor Acres are all three different. They've just chosen to do three different strategies.
Is it really three fund balances underneath there, or is it all?
That's the
Okay.
way we
And
do it
those
on
are
the books.
restricted funds?
Mm-hmm,
So
by
they
law.
don't count into our ratios or anything like that? huh?
It's just theirs. It belongs
Special
to- it's like a
revenue
business,
fund.
like a separate business.
It's
Each
a
fund is like a separate business.
It's a special
So
revenue
you're
fund.
investing that money and making you guys some return too?
Are you telling the other guys about the rate you can get?
Well,
Keep
we're
it secret.
no, it's just Fed funds rate right now. I mean, we hope.
Yeah.
Well, on one side, I hope they cut the rates. On the other side, I hope they don't cut the rates.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends where you stand on the subject. I want my home equity line interest to go down, so I hope they cut the rates. From a town standpoint, I hope they raise the rates. From my stock ownership in BB&T, I hope they raise the rates. So, well, again, it just depends where you stand.
And lastly, the capital reserve accounts. Those are, those transfers have been made, and the big one, of course, is the Beach and Inlet Management Capital Reserve Fund. That is Fund 90.
3.27.
Yeah. So those receipts for that account are transfers, because there was some monies that came from the general fund, and then there was the sequestration of existing unobligated B-part funds that basically got set aside in that fund. So
Are you allowed to mix funds, money, and investments, or does each one have to be a discrete investment? Because I noticed the
What we
90 is a
do-
discrete investment.
what we do is we make the interest, you have a centralized account, but the interest is parsed out based
Right.
on the balances at a particular point in time.
Because basically all the money is still sitting in the checking account. Every night it gets swept
For
out.
checking, yeah.
Well, the money, all the town's money is pretty much all of it. It's still sitting in the BB&T checking account, and every night a certain amount is swept out for investment purposes, then it's swept back in the next morning.
But the apportionment's based on a fund basis.
Lehman Brothers would have liked to talk to you
Why?
if you had money to sweep.
Yeah.
They went to bed back the next morning and
So-
didn't have it.
so-
And then likewise the water, I think that's Fund 20, and Fund 40, which is the sewer development fee account. What we're doing there is one of those accounts, because of the change in rate structure between the time that the budget was adopted. We didn't amend the budget, and so whatever the actuals are that are collected in those water sewer accounts, those are the amounts that get moved over into those reserve accounts. So for,
Maybe state that. The purpose of those accounts is to house the impact fees? Or what's the purpose of those funds? 70
the
and
system
20 and
development
40.
fees. There's no
Okay,
such thing
all
as
right. The
impact.
system development fees. So the money that comes in's got to go into those reserve accounts.
That's correct.
And is that restricted to, or is that assigned, or what can that money be used for?
Those reserve funds are set up with specific language in them. I'd have to defer to it, but whenever you do a reserve account, you have to say how long it's set up for, what the purpose is.
So we were
There's
required by
three
law to
things.
set them up, or do we have a purpose for
You
setting
had
them up?
you had to set them up. You had to set them up by law, and you had to define the purpose.
Okay. Or what is our purpose?
Well, we'd have to pull that up. I don't know.
I mean,
Well, like
I'm getting a little confused because, I mean, I remember the old days when we used to call B-part the sand fund, and that was just for sand. And but then we got all these other expenses. Now we've created another, 80. So is that the new sand fund, or I mean, we got a lot of funds here, and it's, And I just wonder if we're taking out of one pocket, putting another, taking it back out of the pocket when we need it, put it back in the other one. I'm confused why we need this many
Actually,
funds.
with the B part, it was never intended to be a sand fund. It was 30-20,
It was
sand pretty much.
called
and
that
then
for many years.
all the other recreation, tourism, access to the
I-
beach, parks, all that sort of stuff.
So why don't we just
Do
put
you
B
want me-
part in with general?
Do you want me to read what the water and sewer capital reserve
Yeah,
funds are for?
yes, please.
The purpose of the capital reserve fund is to provide funding for expansion of the water system, not limited to the research and funding of the second water tower. The approximate period of time during which the monies will be accumulated will be 5 years. Approximate amounts to be accumulated will be $400,000. That's probably changed now. The monies will be derived from water capacity fees collected and transferred from the water sewer fund under authority of HB 436.
Okay.
These are also in the budget message last year. If you need, so
Okay,
you don't have to write it
I
down.
think I got it. But also on some of these, maybe it was the expense. Some of them said like miscellaneous. It didn't say water. It said capital reserve miscellaneous.
That was the 80.
Well, 20, 40, and 90.
Well, you gotta remember on the capital reserve fund, on the expenses for the capital reserve fund, those are really ghost accounts because you can't expense money straight from a capital reserve fund. The money has to be actually, when money is authorized to be expended from a capital reserve fund, it has to be transferred either by resolution or ordinance back to an operational account. So the description on those expense lines in the capital reserve fund, they were what was existing in the account, but there will never be a check written on those expense lines in the capital reserve account.
They're used to balance.
Yeah, I gotta have an expense line to go along with a revenue line in a capital reserve account and make it be zero. Or my system burps.
Maybe that's where I'm getting hung up because it's not a real expense if we haven't.
It's not.
Okay.
It's like a specialized savings account.
Well, I got, because I was going
Yeah.
through them too, and like when we can't kind of transfer forward a balance forward, we're calling it a revenue. And I'm like, wait a minute, that kind of defies everything I know about revenue. Is it inputs and output, cash flows ins and outs, or is it? I mean, we're calling them revenues and we're calling them expenses. To me, that just is not accurate.
I'm good as far as the highlights on the budget there for me. I mean, if anybody's got
Okay,
questions.
but
Well, I mean, I was trying to make sense of this, and I took the numbers off of these reports, and the ones that Tony sent, and plotted them in to see what they look like.
Right.
And I mean, there's a couple weird things like negative revenues and negative expenses, and then it looks like
could you track that back to us in the
You can
Well,
show us.
yeah, in June, water sewer fund had a negative $500,000 expense, and then the B part,
we don't have those monthly things here, so
the
you,
B part had a negative $369,000 revenue. So I assume those are the and I'm just trying to figure out, because if you interpret the report to say this is the budget and this is the month to date and this is the year to date, then when you plot it, it looks weird in some
would
situations.
we have reported, David, in some month?
I don't know what you're referring to.
I'm
there.
going off the reports that you got and sent, which I assume you got from David.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and tell y'all something though. We need to be very careful about violating the open meetings law. And the reason why I didn't respond to either one of your questions that was generated, because Mr. Shironi asked for some work
Yeah,
products.
no,
He performed a physical analysis and then distributed to it. Tom, you picked up on it.
Yep.
It's a
Well, no, I-
don't fell down the rabbit hole of
No.
a digital meeting and are
I will
Let me
argue
finish.
no.
I would say that you're on the cusp of violating the open meetings law because now you've brought a work product to an open meeting that you're referring to, the public hasn't had the opportunity to do that. So I am at a loss I haven't reviewed that information, and I did so purposely because I thought that we were on the cusp of violating the open meeting law. If there's a discussion.
Excuse me, a second. You can distribute stuff, you just don't want to be discussing it by email, right?
Well, I think
It's
that
actually dangerous to distribute.
I think that at a certain point that it's the intent of providing information that sends you over the edge.
What if you provide it in the agenda? Then
In the agenda,
as long as we can get it early enough to create any questions we haven't
That's
provided.
right. Then everybody's looking at the same thing. The public has an eye on it,
Yeah.
and
That's
it's
full
appropriate to
transparency.
discuss it. Yeah, that's full transparency there.
I don't think when you
Let
distribute,
me-
if I distribute something to everybody on the board, it's as though I'm asking you to make some decisions. And we're not allowed to do
Oh, I
that.
understand that.
Now,
So
now
what
I thought it
point
was
is it
just
just
information.
sharing information, which is
I
not,
think
because I
that's
took years
splitting
of
the hairs,
sharing
yeah.
information. I mean, there is absolutely nothing new here. These numbers are exactly the numbers from the report. So it's just,
and I would tell you that the clerk's gonna say that information is that any deliberation on that should take place in the public construct.
which is right now.
Right, but the public has not
Same.
had privy to that as far as an agenda
Yeah,
package.
well, not the graph, but they have the numbers.
And the numbers were provided to them how?
By you posted to the website
But, well, I
on a
mean,
monthly
that's-
basis.
Right, but the analysis has not, the
There's
intent to perform an analysis.
There's no analysis has been performed. This
There's
is
no
just,
analysis,
this
it's
is
just
a
a
graphical representation of those numbers. There's no analysis.
Okay.
I mean, I can tell you my analysis because I felt that it was my job to try to add some value, but I've not shared that with anybody.
Well,
public
I'm just saying that chart was not part of this package,
I
and
get
I'm
it.
not prepared to discuss it, and neither would the public.
So,
The public
let's-
would not be knowing what you're looking
So on a
at.
go-forward basis, can we, whenever the quarterly financial reports are finished, then we have the opportunity to review them, create any questions, and submit anything to be on the agenda for discussion?
And that's totally appropriate to give that to the chair. The chair puts it
So
on the
you'll
agenda.
give it to the clerk.
Well, I mean,
Distribute it.
but the chair should acknowledge that that's an agenda item.
Right.
Okay.
Not only
I'll-
agenda
I'll-
item, but this is material that relates to this.
Right.
That's
And then we can discuss
Then you-
it.
Okay, no, I'll put it away.
I'm
So
with you.
based on looking at numbers,
This is just,
it appears that the water sewer revenue is gonna come dramatically under budget. Last year it came in at 70%. This year it's gonna come in very much under. The water sewer expenses are gonna be on budget, so we're gonna, just my analysis of numbers says that we're gonna be running down the fund balances in B part and water sewer,
Okay.
because the expenses are gonna exceed the revenues.
Well, let me check the revenue.
Well, let me ask something kind of relative to that, this as a general observation. The timing issues that you have in the year, things happen at certain times. Is that fairly consistent year to year?
It
In
is.
general.
It's a
Yeah,
sine
but it's
wave.
fairly consistent.
It is.
So, were we to be able to discuss in the future, I think a year-to-year comparison, in addition to the year to budget, because year-to-year does take that into consideration. We're going to have the same question every March because of a timing difference. It's getting ready to hit in April. So, if we can, in addition to seeing the one against budget, if you see it against the same period last year, that will have a tendency to level out the questions, I believe, because there's a seasonal nature to both revenue and expense.
And I would venture that any differences would be explained either through a hurricane event
Yeah.
or probably like in the case of the water sewer fund, we're running a capital project.
capital.
But that would give you the opportunity to kind of focus on those exceptions and manage by exceptions, not just manage by looking at 500 accounts here.
Right, I agree. Tom, your question about water use charges? You said that the water
Water
use,
revenue from that account,
water use charges, is that what you're talking
no,
about?
water total revenues. I just looked at total,
Okay.
what's water? 30?
30.
30 revenue, assuming this is the budget, assuming this is the year to date,
Right,
we're at 54%, we're
Right.
3/4 of the way through the year.
right. But
And-
what you failed to do is you did not consider the fund balance appropriation that I said.
Well, that's what I'm
in the beginning.
saying, because
Yeah.
that's where I get confused, because you've got revenue and you've got expenses.
But
But if you're bringing in money from savings,
then you're spending down your
you're
savings.
spending down your fund.
Well, but again, on the expense side, we're basically running a capital project out of the expense side, which is the entire lion's share. You're paying for that capital expense from your accrued prior year revenues. That's where that money's coming from. You're paying for
Well,
your.
I mean, are we accruing revenue? I mean, it seems like we're spending the last, because the year before this was the same situation where we're spending revenue.
But you also had a partial capital expense that went in from the engineering design into the last quarter of last year. But pretty much your operational expenses are, we're not making much. Operational expenses are pretty well zeroed out. Your capital charges that are collected really go to pay for the debt service on the existing, sewer plant, Brunswick County bill, and the water collection system. So we're
The
pretty.
capital charges are coming in on the revenue accounts, is that correct?
That's correct.
And mostly they follow property tax, they come in over the fall, winter,
That's yes.
okay.
Unless
And then
somebody can't pay their taxes.
So then the expenses, well, because those are in there, and the expenses include the debt service payment.
Yes.
If it's been
Okay.
paid.
Right.
It's
So
like one
what
point.
happens when expenses exceed revenues? 'Cause that's my,
Well,
if I were to place a bet, I'm gonna say that's what's gonna happen.
If the board hadn't already approved it, the board would have to approve taking some money out of the savings account. It's got to match up at the end of the year.
Oh, right, and it matched up last year, and that's how we ended up with a negative expense, because.
I'm not sure how, do you know where we would have ended up with negative numbers of expense or revenue for a fund by month? I couldn't pick up in mind how we would end up having a negative expense or a negative
On a monthly
on a
basis,
monthly basis. Yeah.
it's highly probable. I haven't looked at it that way, but because of the way that the debt service payments hit on the different 3 tiers of finance and instruments with Brunswick County, that we have to pay money out ahead of time before we get the large revenue stream in on the capital charges with the tax collections at the beginning of the year.
But how would you have a negative revenue, a negative expense? Somebody
Oh, a
refund-
negative
Yeah, would you have a negative expense? How would you get a refund or, for a month you'd have a whole month.
Could you give me a specific example of a negative
Well, yeah,
expense
well, it
line
shows
item?
up on
Now on a negative revenue, that's where you actually took in more revenue than you thought. But a negative
Yeah,
expense,
That's pretty straightforward,
Can I pull it up, or is that?
and that's
pulling
good
in?
news.
I'm thinking. I really think what's happening, Tom, is you're getting tripped up in your shorts with the fund balance appropriation at the end of the year.
I don't think that's the case. There it is, if you want to see it. Which
The-
one are we looking for? This is your June, this is the one that you sent Tony
okay.
for June of 18. Which one are we looking at? We're looking at the water sewer expense, right?
I'm talking about is a journal entry that we've done to make a correction to a.
Well,
to
it's
a line
interesting
item
because the
entry.
numbers are actually different than what was posted to the website in June. So I don't know if that was a correction. Because those numbers from the information that Tony sent are not the same as the numbers that were.
But a June one would probably be end of year adjustment, right?
Well,
Which could have been a number of things.
Could have been a compilation of things.
Yeah, it could be a bunch of things. If we had overcharged expenses through
He
May,
had to refund.
and the auditor came in and said, oh, by the way, I got to reverse those, you know,
so wouldn't that be a
Which one are you
correct? That
on?
wouldn't.
you've overcharged and we have to reverse it, then you'd have a negative. That's the only way I can see having a negative expense. They were reduced because the adjustments for the end of the year turned it around.
Let me kind of ask a related question to a little bit of this as we all dig in here. The financial statements, the ones that you shared, kind of a monthly one. We issue a financial statement, the town does, and then there can be corrections to that after the fact for activities, credit cards come in, banks get reconciled, this kind of stuff. And so the statement actually gets changed from the one that would have been issued. It's like we have a March one now. That's going to change because you're going to get a bank statement
It was.
have to reconcile.
It was probably good that day.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Exactly right.
snapshot for one day because
There you go.
what happens
At
is
that point in time.
I don't even get we don't even get the bank statements until 2 weeks
that's
into
the
April,
normal
and
course
so
of
then we
business.
have to go back and
Do you go back and change the numbers?
yeah, we have to because we have to
I think it'd be
balance
worth
the
considering
book.
that
We have to
at some point
balance
in
the
time when you
books.
finish, and to say, okay, this is the March statement. Because right now, we probably can find multiple March statements or February. You know, they're just
The numbers
it
are
changes-
different.
It changes every day, so
Yeah, yeah.
all this is going to be a little bit more
But
frustrating
David,
unless
if
we
you're
can say,
on
well,
the
this is what it was. Whenever you finish, even if it's at the end of the month. I mean,
That's why it's really
Right.
hard to do a month-to-month
It's very hard
analysis
to do.
when you kind of look at it as a quarterly or yearly type.
But aren't these on a cash basis?
Yeah, but you go back.
So we just, so we
Yeah,
Yeah,
but if
I
you
found
don't
it.
reconcile the bank account till you get the
Here-
bank
here it
account
is.
until the 5th of the month.
Debt service negative $616,276.36, which brings the balance of expenses for the month at a negative $542, $569.51. So that's the negative expense in the water sewer for June of last year.
That's a debt service payment.
Yep,
I don't know what that is. I have to look at it. So you know,
$600,000.
I have to look at it.
That's from that. That's
That
from
was
auditor
June of last year,
told us.
right?
I mean,
I'm just,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, because what would happen if you looked at the numbers is you've got these weird numbers at the end to like reconcile, I guess. I'm not sure what it's
We'll
for.
research that.
Okay. Now that does not match the
But-
stuff that was posted
this
on the
is-
web in June.
Well,
David,
That's
you-
it. What June was posted. The
I don't
day
know.
it was
I got it
posted
from.
was
I
just
got it
for
from
that
whatever.
day.
I don't know where you got yours, but I took his.
You're getting hung up on that.
Yeah.
That
I-
what's
I-
posted is just for that day. What number he had is probably a number after June was reconciled, and auditors
and end
and
of year
everything.
journal entries that we
It takes
do
a
from
while
auditor.
Well, I
after
mean,
the
we don't
June
have the
to
audit, so we
balance.
don't.
No, but you wouldn't have to remember, and the audit had millions of dollars of adjustments on 30 June. So it could easily, the auditor could have adjusted stuff during the year that makes this,
I got it.
that's a bit worse.
But you know, so
We had 5 million.
well, I mean, the issue is we can't rely on the numbers, and what
So
are we
let's
wasting our
kind of take the forward how this can be a little confusing and hopefully we can find some solution to it. So let's say we issue a March statement like we did earlier this week. It's going to change. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just reality. It is going to change. At some point in time, it'll be finalized. So let's just say we do it like we have done it. We issue a statement on March 1st. It's a snapshot on March 1st. There are activity in March that just haven't hit the books yet because we don't have the bank statement or the credit card, whatever might contribute to that. Let's say we don't do anything about it, it's still March 1st, the statements get changed. They're really showing up as a March activity. So when you get the April statement on the 1st of April, that activity is going to be in the year-to-date number. It's not going to be in the monthly number. You won't have seen it in the monthly number. You're right.
It never showed up.
Well,
It was an adjustment.
because we
It was
didn't get an updated one, so it's going to make, if this is what we do every meeting, it's going to make it even more challenging because you're going to have to dig into the year-to-date numbers because some activity legitimately that happened after the March statement that was issued, March activity, we looked at a March statement, it's not going to ever show up in a monthly one. It'll only be in the year-to-date. So we'll spend all of our time chasing down some
Unless you
year-to-date.
reprint the monthly.
Unless you just decide when the month closes. We don't need to pretend that March 2nd are the March financial statements. They're not. It will probably be March 30th or March 20th. And then say, these are the statements. And that'll be the ones we'll post online. And this is an accurate and true reflection of the month. And then they don't move. Because you've waited till you legitimately have all the activity in it. There's no pressure to issue a March statement on April 1st if it's not going to be, that's not the
Unless you
official
call it a draft.
a draft. And then
You
to
simply
say,
call it a
is there a
draft.
date in the month, the 20th, the
Yeah.
21st? You say by the 21st we should have everything buttoned down other than June.
And what we've done, I'll admit to the fact that really, this is more from a budgetary side of it, is that the intent was to give the most up-to-date budget,
I'm uncomfortable for the town to have financial statements posted on the internet monthly that are not reflective of what that month was. I mean, I think it just begs that question in the interest of full transparency that we've had. I saw it.
Yep.
I saw a March statement. My numbers are different than yours. What's the deal?
I-
And then you automatically say, what is the deal? When really it's no big deal, It's not a big deal. It's just more a matter of
These are
how
expected events.
expected of it. And we just take a picture of it, the 21st of March, or whenever you issue the final one, that's the final numbers. And then we'll eliminate some of this confusion.
I agree.
A lot of interim statements floating
Well,
around.
but I
Will your system allow you, like on April 15th, to go say, what were the books look like effective March 31st?
They're in that month
Okay,
already.
what-
Even though it is April
whatever-
15th, they're in March.
Well, I understand, I just want to make sure.
whatever point in time.
You pull your say.
What statement does the board review and approve?
The board approves the budget,
So you get a monthly report?
but we get the same thing you do, the same thing is online.
So this one, as an
The
example,
board-
next time you
board
meet,
gets
you'll be
exactly the same
approving
thing.
a statement dated March
The
31st.
board doesn't approve.
No.
It's not approved, we don't approve
You
it.
don't approve
David
the
comes and
financial statements?
explains where we are and any
You don't
issues, that
Have to
sort of
approve
thing.
anything?
Not really, I mean, as long as we see something and David can explain it, then nobody worries about anything.
I'm sorry. What I have done in the past is just do a one-page
Yeah.
quarterly roll-up by fund. It's really a gross representation of where we were generally. There's not a
Set
board of
aside.
commissioners approve that.
Yeah, that's what we just said, like
Okay,
you're
sorry.
out, yeah.
I'll tell you how bad this can get. I wrote a book, and the second edition of it, and before I knew it, I got a call from Washington that said we had to withdraw all those books and we burned them up, and we're issuing new
Something
books.
changed.
And I said, why? He said, well, your statement for AMD for 19, whatever it was, is inaccurate. I said, excuse me? I said, no, I've got it in my hand. I've got the book in my hand, that annual report. Well, they merged with somebody else in the
Restate.
meantime, and they had to go back and restate.
Yep.
So what's available in the public records now is a whole different set for that
Yep.
year. And I said, you don't understand. You didn't need to do that. They could have gotten the actual and do it's just for comparison. But that's how bad it can get. And so we get, and I'm sure at the end of the year, since we're going from a cash to an accrual basis, there's lots of changes between.
Nobody would expect a June 30th. I mean, that's
Yeah.
going to be the exception. We
So I
understand
don't-
that. But the
David,
monthly ones,
would it
at
be-
some point in time,
I'm lucky if I'm able to calculate what the fund balance is going to be.
But would you think it's better to list what we publish as being the draft numbers rather than the final numbers, as those numbers are going to change?
well, what's the motivation for publishing something before you believe it to be an accurate reflection? I mean, is there something compelling that says I've got to have the March statements out there April 1st? Is there some obligation to do that if you know they're not complete, not inaccurate, but not complete?
That's really probably just a and I'll take it on my on me. There's some type of naive desire to provide transparency and this is what we got, y'all, kind of thing. Now, whether that's created more angst than anything, to be quite frank, we've been posting those now for about 2 years, And the only question,
Nobody looks at them, probably.
the only
Well, nobody
question,
understands them.
well, the only question.
Nobody's
that
nobody's going to take this as something they
this-
just want to spend time
Yeah.
on.
This group is the only group that has ever had any type of dialogue on it. Now,
It's our job,
you know,
I
it's
think.
one of the it's one of those things where it's like people, we want transparency, and
Well-
then when you open up, you know, the complete
When you show them how the sausage-
transaction, when you show them how the sausage is made, they really don't. Yeah, I don't want.
Well, but I think that's a lot of the issue. Is this level is, I mean, either go up a level and look at big trends, month-to-month comparisons, year-over-year, or you go down to the transactions and view the transactions and look. But at this level, you have no context for the number. You don't know what's in it. You don't know how it compares. It's just impossible to really make any assessment of that number.
Yeah, probably the way we go, if you waited till the March was really done, we're not posting it anymore. 'Cause
Yeah, no, I know.
only one month-
It's
only
gone.
1 month is online, right?
Yeah.
We only have 1 month online, and by that time, the new
there
month is out.
are multiple ones out there, aren't there?
No, I just put the
It
new
takes
one
one
up.
down,
I just been
yeah.
putting up the new one. That's
Take
just
the
what
one
I'm
down.
doing.
You'd have to
Taking
go
up the
back to
one
the
down.
town and ask.
That's
for
why
the password.
I'm glad you asked for what you asked for, because there didn't no way to get it.
Yeah.
I don't know what the audience would be, you know, that would have interest in that kind of thing. At some point in time, you can just go to the state treasurer's website and, you know, pull down the financials on, you know, to look at that kind of thing. But the general public has no desire to engage at that level.
But that's not until the audited reports get,
Right.
the audited financials get
That's right.
submitted, which I don't think we're to that topic yet, but we're looking at April, we still don't know where we stand as of June.
Oh, I don't know, but you haven't had any of the complaints, right?
I'm sorry.
You haven't had any of the complaints about the monthly reports.
Matter of fact,
So,
I would love to have somebody just call me up and say, "What's this line here?" But we haven't even had that.
I think there's a lot of detail.
There's not enough context in my mind.
But there are tools available, you know, that we could, I would like to think that we would strive for having some tools available, whether we develop them or they can modify the plan, that can give us this big picture stuff. Because getting down on this line item, I personally don't think that's our responsibility. If, as an audit committee, we're seeing some big picture, this fund seems in a funny place compared to budget or compared to where it was this time last year, can we ask about that?
Yeah.
So at least we're making an informed question
That's
versus
right.
just hodgepodge and just, you know, shooting through a bunch of
So
numbers.
your proposal and your proposal I found valuable. I would much
Just a
rather,
big picture look and say, okay, well, this is.
even in here, instead of looking at this, which we can look at, we want to monthly, looking at a graph of where are we month to month, year to year, or maybe even compared to another island or something, but an overview would be easier.
Just to
I'm
allow
not
you
sure
to
the board
focus.
wouldn't appreciate that as well.
Might be
Just say a
different.
graph. It's much more easy to interpret than it is looking at.
Well, we live
pages.
in the app world today. I mean, it's picture driven.
A lot of people want it, you know, they want a snapshot. They want to give it to me in 5 minutes. I'm not taking 2 hours to dig through this. You know,
You could still post what we do now as a draft and then put also a graphical representation, just a couple pages or 3 or 4 pages or something like that. But I'm happy that you guys did this because I was hoping that we would be able to offer David some ideas on how we might, as a town, put out the financials in a more easy to understand format.
well, can we, before the next meeting, maybe we can continue to develop ideas and make sure we
We gotta
get
have
those in
open meetings,
advance so
I think.
that at the
Maybe
next
we- yeah.
meeting,
At the
we
next
maybe
meeting.
can
Yeah.
have as an
Bring it to
agenda item.
separate it
These
to
are some
everybody.
tools that might work and be able to discuss those in a public way that would just make it simpler for everybody.
I'm okay with
It's
that.
not a crisis, but it might be helpful. Okay, we wrap this one up?
One of the things, I did bring it, but since we weren't supposed to bring anything, I'm not gonna pull it out. But when David and I looked at what we could invest safely, I charted with Mandy's help. I got the bank statements and charted the balances for 3 years. And to David's point, I mean, you can see a perfect sine wave of where the tax revenue comes in, then the expenses go out.
And the B part comes in.
Yeah.
Over
And
services.
they're appositioning sine waves because B part's up when ad valorem's
right.
down.
And
So,
ad
Yeah.
That's why seeing it year over year, I think, is important because that will level out those
that's right.
natural variances that you have.
That's right.
You know. then we won't be arguing about, well, what is this number? Well, that's the way it happens every
That's-
March.
that's-
you know?
Every June it happens.
Every June it happens,
July,
whatever,
every
yeah.
August or whatever.
So we can
Okay.
really focus on anything that
That's
might,
right.
an abnormality versus just a regular course of a very complicated and varying business.
Okay, on item number 4, everybody received the RSM, or we'll call it a draft now, final, because they haven't actually sent, David, you haven't gotten the final yet, have you?
No, I think that I told the commissioners that, and maybe it was you, John, that I'd actually followed up with Robbie after
Right.
that and was trying to pin him down on when we would get, when we get the finalized report, and it was the, I got all my guys are working 60, 80s, it's tax season, and then it's gotta go to a third party, so it was fairly non-committal on, well, when you gonna get me the final report kind of thing. And I haven't followed back up with him probably in a month.
But I don't see that.
Now, is this the RSM guy or the audit guy? I'm sorry.
It's the RSM guy.
Okay.
I don't see that the control issues that were identified are probably solid, they're there. And David's gonna work on that. And David, can you confirm that Ann White's gonna come and work with you?
Well,
I'm
I've
building a-
touched base with her, but I've really been waiting on on that report being finalized somewhat. But, I've gone ahead and are trying to lean into the wind on getting a head start on some of those issues that have been identified, not just the internal control things, and I'll report that back to the board.
Well, I've checked with her and she's been busy, I guess, and she said
Who is
she's
she?
gonna be
I'm sorry.
getting.
Yeah.
Who is
She works
this?
with the North Carolina League of Municipalities,
Okay.
about a 50-year career as a
And
Town
she's the
finance director?
she's the former finance officer of Charlotte.
Oh,
She
wow.
lives at Oak Island.
lots
That
of
one, I've
experience.
not heard before about their observation that on the CAFRA, that might end up being kind of a question that the external auditor can't really prepare that anymore, and over time, we have to take it on. Is that how legitimate observation is that?
Well, if you look at the number of communities in North Carolina that follow that same
Mhm.
precedent, it's about 98% of the local governments in North Carolina, including large counties, that actually the CAFRA is prepared externally.
So that charge they made in there, that they're concerned that an external auditor can't do that any further, is that, you don't think that's
That's
right?
an
Well, there's a difference
that's an
between doing it-
AICPA rule.
External
And
and
the
having the auditor
LGC
audit their work. I think those are two
Yeah,
issues.
The LGC in 17 or 18 published the same thing, you cannot do that, so.
So who's gonna
a
do
lot
it
of-
for us?
A lot of
If you- if
small
you're-
towns.
A lot of small towns don't have the staff, they're complicated.
Well,
to
they're
do
bringing
that.
in, external
Someone to
auditors,
do it.
different from your annual
Different
auditor.
than
Right,
Oh,
right. So you
different
got two
group.
parties.
Okay.
And just for an update on that,
Yeah.
because of the Government Accounting Standards Board rules, LGC's rules, a lot of these small firms that we've dealt with in the past are not doing it anymore. They're not auditing anymore.
Well,
They're holding out to do the accounting.
as a preemptive measure, and this is a report back to the board, I'm sending 2 of my staff members to the How to Do CAFR school on May the 21st. So one way or the
That's a good
other,
move.
we're going to be able to deal with it.
Yeah.
Or you can get somebody to come in and work with you,
Well,
you know.
and that may be so, but it's a lot easier to have somebody have it stamped on their forehead that they now know how to do a CAFR, and then
It would be good to have that in here
Yeah.
if you can find a way to
So
make that happen.
who's going?
Yeah.
Those two? That's what I figured.
so don't plan on anything
Jump street.
happening on May the 21st. I'm probably have to send them up there the day
Is that a
before.
lead?
Bring them
Who's
up.
that? Who's offering that training? Who is that?
Greg Allison.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, good. That's awesome.
But on that issue, when I talked to Ann White and I discussed.
And we're going to bring her in too. I'm not going to leave her out of the fold too. We're going to bring
She
her in.
said that when she comes to do the work for the town, she's happy to sit with us for an hour, 2 hours, whatever, and do a complete review for you, update everyone on how the municipal accounting works,
That would
how
be
the fun
beneficial,
stuff
I
works,
think.
the whole scheme.
That'd be beneficial.
And she's very, very knowledgeable. She's an outsider. I doubt if we'll have to pay her. I think municipalities are, League of Municipalities is gonna pay for it. And she said she'd be happy to do that.
And I know it's maybe not on the agenda, but I know, Tony, you had a question in those minutes about was there training available, and there's actually a webinar this is for elected officials, but it's about um, budgets and terminology and fund balance and financial reporting. That webinar is available. And you know what? How about if I just send this
That'd
out
be
to
great.
the
Thank you,
board and
Bill. Thank you for
everybody?
looking at
It's
that.
April the 23rd is when it is, and there's a number of ways to do that. Whether the board wants to assemble it for everybody. I haven't looked at what the registration is, and it might be that it's you can do the live thing, but then it's recorded and access it. So let me just get that out, and we'll see what the best.
Do you think
thing
there's no
is.
online stuff?
Well, sometimes
government
when
have-
they do it says it's an interactive class. So that tells me that it's live, and they'll take questions. But then a lot of times they'll do those interactive classes, and then allow you to access it later. So, but I just
That'd be
wanted
great.
to
Thank you.
get
Yeah,
that
that'd
back
be
to
great.
you. So
And
there's
if there's any fee, I'd be happy to pay. I'd like to do that.
Admitted for CPE?
Continuing this with RSM.
well, you do get CPE credits
Yeah.
for it. Yeah.
With RSM, the board has asked that the audit committee be prepared that when David implements an internal control, that he'll describe what is done, and we would just pass it through before we advise the board that looks like that takes care of business. We don't know any better than that. That looks fine to us.
And that's after, not before.
When he's implemented a control, when he's developed, or if whatever he wants to, but if he developed a control, he's already started, he would come and say, and we say, yep.
Yeah, so
Now, if we see some flaws or a way to improve it, you can do that if he's happy with that, but that's what'll get passed to the board.
That's
So we're
fine.
kind of just an intermediary for the board. We're not making any decisions,
Yep.
but just our judgments on what David and whoever he works with has come up with. Looks like it's gonna work.
Yep.
Our goal being that in time, that we try to eliminate as many of those deficiencies on the RSM report as we can, and make us more reliable financial reporting.
Well, has the board prioritized those recommendations? Some of those are pretty significant projects. Have they given the manager any direction
No,
on this
he's-
is most important, or?
And my understanding is that I need to get through the budget first, and then we'll take those down. But like I said, we're just not going to let those lay fallow. I've probably got 2 pages of insight as to what we're going to do. I'm sending those to them. So I'm working up a plan, but I got to get through the first week of May first before I pull that back out.
And some of them would require some outside help, if you embark on some HR program or that.
Well,
you
I mean, and
gotta get
that's
people in to
another
help you do that.
that's another one of the things, and that the board I've gone ahead and done. The board okayed actually doing a classification pay planning
Yep.
study, so that's under contract. MAPS group
Yeah.
and Becky is coming in, and we're actually going to go ahead and start that. It's just about a 90-day process, so that will be
Well, they would
underway.
put that in their final report if some of your actions you've already taken action on some of their key recommendations. That's one of the biggest ones in here.
Yeah.
Is that?
But the board was gracious enough to go ahead and get started on that. I think it's $7,500 that we went ahead and kicked that into gear, and we'll be probably the week after next getting that going hard.
I mean, the ultimate goal here is no material or significant weaknesses in the audit. That's my understanding. Is
The one that
we want clean audits.
The one we'll have trouble getting rid of is that we don't have enough people. It's too small a department, have a lot of segregation of duties. Unless we come up with some different scheme.
It's pretty
somebody
common.
else.
I mean, that's, I
That
know
is for a
everybody
small
complains
town.
about it.
You don't
It's
have
pretty
enough
common
staff.
in this
You
one.
can't get
But
people
we,
to this
we,
far.
we've also got some ideas internally on how might that be.
That's
do it.
where we would play, is you bring it to the board, to the audit committee, and we say, yeah, that looks
But
good.
that's going to involve some folks' duties being amended somewhat before we start amending folks' duties. And probably want
So have you told Jeremy he's reconciling your debt?
Jeremy gets not yet. I figured I'd let the honeymoon wear off a little bit first here before we go there.
Say, have you ever balanced a checking account?
Okay, go to number 5, update on the 2018 audit.
I hope you know more about it than I do, John.
Well, I might. I called him. I said, everybody's pretty upset. And he said, well, we had problem reconciling the fund balances end of year to the beginning of the next year. We're working on that. We're on the last fund. That was 3 or 4 days ago. He thought by early this next week, he'd be ready to call David and organize a meeting.
Sounds like the same story you told me about 6 weeks ago.
Well, except only a couple of weeks ago, you had about an hour meeting with the auditor, right? To give new information to them?
Oh, I've been meeting with them off and on for a long time. I did just touch base with them today because of the meeting, and supposedly Jay is reviewing the reports, and that's as much as Jacob could do.
He's
You've dealt with the auditor, right? I don't know who the auditor is.
the pages those pages must gonna be wore down to enough because he's been reviewing that report now for
Yeah, yeah,
3
More
months.
information.
He's new this year.
This is a new one.
Yeah,
You have
this
it,
year.
And for the audit committee, you gotta appreciate that we keep the books on a cash basis. The auditor didn't know this, but they've gotta convert it to an accrual basis. So all the receivables, all the payables, the whole scheme has to be changed.
So when do we decide if we're picking them for next year?
Yeah. Do you have a multi-year
Well,
contract?
as soon as the audit's done, we make a decision then.
You can it's a multi-year contract, but you
We
can
can always
punch.
change it. We can always change it.
But the thing about it now is that
He's up the learning curve. Yeah.
we've already
Yeah.
got familiar, and then everybody that would everybody's going to be taken up for the next time.
And they've made huge investment in
Well, yeah, they-
getting to
they-
know the town.
I'd give them 2 years at least. I mean, like I said, you've invested a lot of time and effort just
I
getting
think I
them up
just
to
spell out
speed.
the challenges when this one gets finished, the challenges and frustrations that.
And I think we'll ask
Yeah.
him,
Yeah.
ask the partner to tell us, how it's gone and that sort of thing. But there were some surprises to them, obviously. Do we
It's
have
a
a
long
computer
time. I mean, that's
glitch
a long time, isn't it?
Do we have-
Does it normally take y'all this long?
with last year's adjustments?
They said because of the hurricanes they got behind.
Did-
Um,
Was there a
Computer
computer
glitch.
glitch or something with double counting last year's adjustments? Double booking?
Yeah, the prior auditor sent a entry that said that we had not made. And then when Mandy put it in, it was throwing everything off. So took us a while to go back and work through that and figure it out, what was going on there.
So,
And
but
once
he-
we did, I think,
What I'll
you know.
do,
right now, is that a computer glitch or
yeah,
Yeah.
some other glitch, it's a glitch.
that's a
But as soon
computer
as he
glitch?
lets
So-
us know, I will contact one of you to come with me, and we'll meet with David and the auditor and bring back to committee in preparation of giving it to the board.
Yeah, well, can we talk about the timing on that? Because normally there's always a bum rush to get the report to the local government commission. I mean, the contract says October 31st, and then the local government commission slid that back to December for the 1st. Now, if you talk to the auditor, everything's copacetic, no worries. Well, when I went to the finance officers conference a month ago, Sharon Edmondson, who's the director of fiscal management, pretty much said 1 December is the deadline. I mean, 1 December, you're late. I mean, you got, yeah, there was a hurricane, but you're late. So, and she was fairly adamant about requiring an updated contract because that due date is busted. So the LGC's got to okay the contract. Now I don't know beyond that how this is going to play out. If it's just she goes and acknowledges it and it comes back. But I mean, I can't pay those guys until Sharon says that I can pay them. So it may be that there's an amended contract that's got to go to the Board of Commissioners, and that's LGC's requirement there. So, but what I was getting at on the phasing of the report to the board, and let's pretend that it's really October and everything was
Right.
on time. In reviewing, the auditor finishes the report, it gets sent to the local government commission. In the past, I've been loath to provide a report to the Board of Commissioners by the auditor without the local government commission's okay on, you know, the seal of approval on that. You know, I'm of a mind now that if that report goes to the local government commission and it's briefed to the audit chair and another member, that I'm okay with that going to the Board of Commissioners. You know, and having the auditor come down and brief it before it comes back from the local government commission.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
Well,
you can always say that. You can always say that. Well, you know, the local government commission hasn't okayed it yet, but this is what we think is the program.
But you're signing a document called a
Right.
letter of representation that says the board approved it. That's what the letter of representation says. The board who hired them has approved this audit, and you sign it, and Alan signs the letter of representation. So to them, that means the board said it's okay, as far as they're concerned. The only way to do that is to let the board see it. Or the board approves the audit committee being the one, or the two of the audit, you know, two members of the committee with you.
That's where I am with it.
Gotcha.
Instead of waiting until it comes back.
When you hear, let me know, and,
Okay.
you know, and we'll, I'll get one of you to go with me and sit, because the group asked a couple of meetings ago that two of us go, not just one, when we have a meeting with the auditor. Okay, that's the 18th. So any new business, anybody have anything new that you want to bring up regarding our role, or?
I mean, did we resolve the reporting finance, or we're gonna, I mean, how do we figure out what we?
Well, I like the idea of the report of a macro report.
Well, let me
but
say,
I'll
I
tell you
can
that I
summarize
didn't
that.
look at it. I didn't look at it.
I understand. If we, as a building block, can some statement be marked as final, so we know that's the one we want to look at, so it's complete even if it's a little later. And then can we dialogue leading up to the next meeting with the thoughts that we will have some potential macro view review formats to discuss at the meeting? Is
I don't think
anything
we
wrong
can.
with that?
Well,
We can bat around different ways, how we might want to present. I think we're all after the same thing here.
Yeah, no, we are. I just want to be cognizant of the open meeting laws. So I don't know if it's one-on-ones or if it's...
Well, I think that what is safe.
You can't develop a report for discussion without us having a
Right.
discussion.
I think what is safe is that there's two people that have expressed an interest in developing a tool for the everybody else's review, and that it's totally all right for you two to work out, you know, something.
So why don't we document that in these
And
minutes?
that you guys are going to get together and
We'll work
develop
together.
something.
The two of us can work,
But
three of us
they'll
can't.
bring that
Right.
Bring it to the
Yeah.
next audit committee meeting,
Yeah.
whenever you're ready for it. But I think,
I mean, that's
So, I mean,
safe.
there's two issues.
So-
One is the report and the being able to make sense of what this is saying. The other is the data behind it, which
Yeah.
is a different issue.
but if David has the time, and any one of you contacts David, and he says, yeah, there's no problem with you talking to David,
Yeah, absolutely not.
you know.
Let me ask this question just so we beat this completely to death. If we went back and ran a July statement today,
One
July for 2019, then that, and we would call that's the final July numbers. You're not likely to go back in and be adjusting anything on that.
I hope not.
You would, but, you know, so maybe we could start to get our history by just going back, not what ran last year and was maybe a July statement, but if you ran the report today dated July 31st, that should be a pretty accurate July and consistent going forward statement, would you
Well,
think?
see, that was my question on the data, because I took the files that you got.
Yeah.
I assume they were the latest and greatest run.
Yeah, I don't know where they came. I mean, I know who sent them to me, but I don't know exactly.
Was it a separate run?
They came from the software.
So you ran it.
So if I go back and run July, I mean, unless something got put in there that
Since you ran it the last
since
time.
I ran it last time,
So
it
those
should be
numbers
the
should
same.
be, then those numbers should be kind of the
Yeah.
final for most of those months.
Wow.
So how do you update it? Do you make an entry in the ledger that then
We
goes
do
and
journal
changes
vouchers if we
Do
need
a
to.
journal entry
yeah.
for it?
And do you date them then? Like if you correct July's and August, the date on the journal entry
Yeah, the
is
journal
August?
entries have dates, and the auditors go through them and make sure they're,
So let's
what
say
they're
you
supposed
found
to be.
something today.
We're not just flinging money around.
If you found something today that was going to correct something in July, and you wanted to make a journal entry today, would that journal entry be dated in April or would it be dated in July?
Well, it would show I did it in April, but it would be dated for
July.
July.
Okay.
So
So,
they said
and,
this is July.
Yeah.
so it would change the July statement?
Yes.
Yep, yep. Yeah.
But to the point, I mean, July's probably ain't gonna change if she runs it again. So July through
Some
at
period of
least
time should be
December,
pretty solid.
they're probably
No,
pretty solid.
I hear you. I mean, that gets back to the other point, which June is showing a negative expense.
But I think you just need to sit down with David and y'all look at the numbers. And
So
say,
probably
why?
those ones that you sent that were all the 17 and 18 year, other than June, probably are solid.
Well, yeah.
They're
Would they
not-
have
that's
any
a long time.
corrections from the auditor? Because the audit, that's what's being audited
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah,
So
June
if
one
they had correcting entries, those would be in those reports.
We haven't gotten
Not
them
yet.
yet, but if they did have, yes, they will be effective June 30th.
And did they go back into the month that the?
No, they'll go
or will
June.
They all be June.
They'll be
auditor
June 30.
adjustments?
That's year-end
Yeah.
adjustment.
David, on that,
Yeah.
have you not seen corrections yet or anything? Nothing?
No correction?
I think they'll probably hold it to it all, do it all.
Yeah, do it all at one time.
Yeah.
Usually it comes through as a 33 cents here, 29 cents here.
You're saying it's
$600,000.
not in the $100,000 range.
I think it is.
Sometimes it is.
My once a day robocall.
It was, one in 2010 was $1.5 million,
I wasn't.
one entry. So we just, sometimes it's end of year adjustments normal, others is we had booked something differently than the auditor thought it would be booked. But the final word is with David as to whether or not it gets booked or not. They're recommended adjustments. They're not the law. So
Yeah.
if David says, you think that's the way it ought to be, I don't think it ought to be, then you may not book it that way. But they'll give him a list of all the
Yeah.
recommended end of year
But
adjustments.
then the auditor won't sign off on it, right? If he doesn't agree with it.
Yeah, because he's gone before it ever gets to him. David's gonna take a long time to enter all these things.
So when we approach our next quarterly meeting, which I guess is in July,
July the 5th.
then any statement we have dated for June or for the first half of the year really will not be a complete picture at that time because we've already said it takes 3 or 4 weeks for that to kind of clear. So then just asking this question then, do you want to meet in July recognizing any review you do of the second quarter is really not really quite
Well, let's
complete
think it's the
yet?
fourth quarter.
Well, fourth quarter is not
End
really
of the
quite
year, it's in
complete.
the year.
Well, that makes that one even more complicated. But in a typical quarter,
Yeah.
that's something just food for thought. I think it'll be very frustrating to analyze a lot of stuff that the numbers continue to change.
It is.
That's part of
Very
what we've seen
frustrating.
while we're all figuring it out.
Yes.
Is whatever reality is, then you can build models and tools. But if that moves all the time, that is very
Well, because you end up back at just taking the audited financials.
Yeah.
So we don't even have last June's,
Right.
but once the audit comes out, then to me, the audited financials is the only real rock solid
Yeah.
thing you can, and it's so after the fact that you're never gonna, you'll be off the cliff before
It's
you
always
do it. There is
November
one.
the 1st before we get it normally.
Yeah, no, that's an issue. I mean, that to me is the issue is are we headed to a cliff or not? I mean, you don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
Dave,
I think that's where the manager, the budget manager comes in, is to make sure that some functional discipline like
don't spend more than you take in. That kind of
I mean, you don't really need an MBA for that kind of math. Like Renee used to say, and make sure there's solid procurement policies in place and contracting and encumbrances and those types of
And I
things.
think if we look at, say, July the 5th, we look at the end of year as it sits at that moment, with the understanding that there are going to be adjustments later, especially at the end of the audit, they're gonna make year-end.
Yeah.
We still get a picture from David's view, what do we plan, what did the budget, the board approve for a budget? Have we stayed within the budget? Are we okay? Have we bled down a fund that we shouldn't have bled down to protect the board?
You're going to be hand grenade close with with
Yeah.
that one.
We'll be close, and
yeah.
there's gonna be, unless there was a major mistake made, I think we'd be on, and I think the public and the board would be benefit from having us look at it and say, well, understanding there's gonna be some changes.
How do you reconcile?
How about if we
Go
do
ahead.
this? How about if you guys get together and come up with a proposed format to bring back to the board, to this board, and perhaps I could actually take it and prep it with that end of year.
Very cool.
But, I mean, is that a way to kind of move
yeah,
something
that's
forward?
I think
And
we
if
move
it's
step by
wrong,
step.
it's right, you know, if it
Yeah,
don't
it's
work,
right.
it don't
We
work.
just need
but-
to
visual
visuals
start to
first.
get-
I, as much as anyone, and I'm not gonna try to speak for the board, but, you know, if there's something that the staff can do in order to move that forward, I mean, I'm okay with doing that. I mean, it's, even if it's, we're gonna do something even if it's wrong, kind of thing, so.
One thing we do is step by step. If within a year we've improved the presentation to the board and to the public, then we've done something. And I already like what both of you put out as a higher level that people could understand. A little graph of last year to this year, last month to this, you know, that sort of thing. That's helpful.
So, I mean, if y'all get something to me and I'll, you know.
If you don't
put
mind,
some numbers.
I'd like to get, and I'll email you, get the bank statements from when I cut off middle of last year up to now, so I can continue doing my graph for
Oh,
the
yeah.
ins
Okay.
and outs.
That's no problem.
Okay?
And I'll submit that for the next agenda.
Anything else?
Do you reconcile your DDA, your bank operating account, to the differences that are in this report or the amounts in this report? I mean, at the end of the day, I ought to be able to go look at our bank account and say, okay, if you had this much revenue and this much expense, the balance in the checking account should be X. Do y'all do that?
Yes.
Okay.
We do it to the general ledger, yeah.
To each fund.
To the banking
Each
account?
fund comes
Okay.
up to what we
Yeah.
It'd just be reconciled if there were any outstanding
Yes.
checks or deposits or something, but it's.
As
Yeah, we have to
It's the
show
general
that.
ledger balance, you're tied
Yeah.
to the general ledger.
And,
Yeah.
and what that really ties to is the what I've referred to as the treasury report in the past by fund, the balances that are in there, but you know they're always going to be a couple more.
Sure.
Yeah,
Margaret,
But you
handle
tie that back to what's in the bank.
that's right.
You handle the taxes, right?
Mhm.
I gotta tell you guys, that almost 98% first time through within that's, to me, that's a good number.
Now just realize that the budgeted amount, that's a collection of a budgeted
A
amount,
budgeted
which
amount,
is a
Might not be
percentage
actual.
of the levy.
Right.
So
Right.
probably about
But it's-
95
But
right
it's
now.
still a good.
96
Of
the
of
levy.
That two and a half
Of the actual
million-
levy.
two and a half
Margaret's
million
all
dollars.
over that.
That's a good job.
But second notices went out in the mail today, along with the advertising letter, so hopefully it'll go up.
And
And
you're threatening to raise the interest rate, are you?
So, yeah.
but
Put their little name in the paper and then they have to pay for that as well.
Picture as well.
But it's not just the ad valorem taxes that is the collector's responsibility. It's the occupancy tax collection that falls to her too. So
That's a little more challenging.
Very complicated.
that's a lot. Well, I mean, that's a craft
Yep,
there.
yep.
I mean, the other one's defined by law,
Yeah.
but I almost need to send Margaret to detective school or something there.
The people who do.
Oh, she's pretty good. She's pretty good.
Well, but the other players on Airbnb and those guys, they're
Are
not
they-
playing
are they-
fair.
No.
They're not
Are they
playing fair.
required to do it, they just don't do it, or what?
Well,
is
they do it as a lump sum. They don't tell
Yeah.
you. So it's like, here's $1 million. Is that the right amount or not? You know,
Right.
No, Margaret found that.
you can't
Don't put
break
this
it
in
down
the
by
minutes.
property.
Oh,
by
y'all
rental,
haven't
by-
adjourned yet?
No, but Margaret found that I forgot to list my boat last year, so
Yeah.
she's pretty good.
Yeah. No, it's,
My new
it's,
boat.
it's, Airbnb it for a
Uh-huh.
week. Yeah.
And she found out I forgot to list it
That's a
last
tough
year.
one.
Okay, should we have a motion to
I
adjourn?
move we adjourn.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.